My name's Angelo, and welcome to We Want Picks. I'm sitting here with Chris Reilly, and Chris is going to walk through a lot of your questions around betting, how to bet on UFC, what that means, and how it all works. Before we jump in, go to wewantpicks.com/bets. We have 5 different betting partners. Sign up with any one of those 5 partners, and we will send you $50 as a thank you. That's wewantpicks.com/bets. And Chris, you and I chatted before this. You're going to break down some things for us, so I'll let everybody know, and then we'll jump right in. The first thing you're going to break down is how MMA even fits in this broader sports betting world. Then you're going to talk about where the odds come from and what that means for all of us meaning people who watch the fights and bet on the fights. Then you're going to talk about some industry misconceptions, and then you're going to dive into the odds, probabilities, and what those mean for us, what truly is a minus 200. And the last thing you're going to talk about is, are parlays sucker bets and if you should ever cash out? So I'm very excited to have you here. These are some of the biggest questions we get every single week.
No, Angela, I'm glad to be doing this video with you. I know we spoke about doing this for a while, and I know I've been on I guess you should say, your podcast before, talking about Monkey Knife Fight. And this is not a Monkey Knife Fight video. This is just like, I have been working in this industry for probably 6-7 years now. And, I've been with this channel since you guys started. I remember I reached out to you guys because I just always loved everything you've done. Me and you, we talk every week, even though I haven't been on the podcast that much. So we're in touch, and you guys are a big resource to me. And this is just kind of people helping people. And I really want to just kind of dive into some things because I hear you guys talking every time, and you say things that I'm just like, come on, guys, we can do better than that. And you know what? Let's just kind of work together, because honestly, I didn't get to where I got to in this industry by acting like the best. And it's just kind of utilizing your resources and then working together. And I kind of want to help the We Want Picks family kind of get a better understanding of how all of this works. And we can all grow together. We can all win, because, we're all foot soldiers in this race. We're just trying to, crush these books. Even though I work for them, you know what? It's like I still wager on books too. And it's just like, that's how I got in this industry. Shock, right? Someone who's a gambler got into the industry. So, let's just kind of go over some things and just kind of talk, because MMA is so unique and we love it. But going to like your first segment, like you said, what is MMA to these sports books? And then I think that's a good starting point to start this off. Is the thing is that MMA, you guys, while it's our whole entire world, that's all we do on this podcast, all you do on this podcast. And it is such a small fish in the industry, and these guys don't really pay attention to it. And go figure, it's just like, unless you get, especially when you have like example last week, we had, who was it, Ketlin Vieira and Holly Holm. I mean, you think the sports books are getting pounded with that? They're not. I mean, it's going to be way different if like Conor McGregor's fighting, just because he's the name that people know. And then, yeah, those will get some attention. But for the most part, these books don't really pay attention to these odds. They don't pay attention to that. I mean, a lot of these books, you'd be surprised when we start diving into where these odds come from and how these books get them. It's going to make sense, and you're going to be kind of blown away, because I know when I got into this industry, I had a perception of how this industry worked. And now that I've been in it, I'm just like, I was blown away. It's not anything like I thought when I got into the industry. So yeah, I'm going to kind of reveal some of the secrets, I suppose, but it's not a secret. It's 2022. There's a thing called the internet. This stuff is out there. People can look it up. So it's just like, it's not like this isn't like a magician revealing his tricks or anything. These are very well-known facts to people that are in the industry. But I also realize that if you don't, a lot of people aren't looking into this stuff 40 hours a week like I am. So it is probably new to you. And I'm just kind of excited to like explain a couple things, and then just kind of, we'll go from there and break down some stuff, and hopefully you guys will have a better understanding, which will make us all better MMA gamblers for the most part, which is, something we love, and it's a lot more fun when we win, right?
100%. And one quick, so you talked about how UFC is a very small fish in the sports betting world, and that makes sense. Even when I went out and got these affiliate deals with our, we have the 5 partners.
Yes.
They all were like football. They want me to push football. They're constantly sending me football promos. So I totally get that. And one of the most interesting facts you told me, and this is a while ago, you said, I'm going to mess it up and you'll correct me. You said something like 90% of bets placed are like $5 or less. It was something to that effect. What was that stat you threw at me?
No, Angela, you nailed it. And the majority of the bets are, 90%, that was just kind of off the hip, but They are $5 or less, but the thing that you kind of forgot is they're to win like $1,000. People just love the idea of betting very little to make a lot of money. And this is the action sports books love, because they don't want winning players. And it's evident by a certain owner of a sports book who came out and straight up said they don't want winning players, and their stock price dropped heavily when he said that. But you know what? All the sports books feel that. So, yeah, it's just kind of how these sports books work. And we're going to go through a couple of things here, and you'll see exactly why they want it. They don't want sharp gamblers. They don't want sharp MMA players. They just want the recreational bettor throwing in a couple $5 for entertainment to get rich. So let's kind of move forward and talk about, what do we have up here, Angela? We want to talk about...
the next piece, so you talked about how MMA fits in the sports betting world, small fish in a very large pond. And we could definitely exploit that, and we'll have opportunities to do so.
Yes.
And one of which is odds. Every week I break down the fights. I break down what odds I think are crazy. And sometimes they are crazy. And sometimes we have weeks where everybody thinks 10 underdogs are going to win, and they all lose, and the odds were spot on. So why don't you talk a little bit about where do these odds even come from? So there's hundreds of sports books. We've partnered with 5. There's obviously a couple of very large ones that are legal in certain states. Where do these odds come from? Because they're all, for the most part, pretty aligned on what they offer.
Well, they have to be, and that's something that you need to understand. Let's go ahead and can you pull up like best fight odds? I think that's a great example. And this is kind of why you have companies like, I used to work for a company, which is the leading company, and they basically were this. Best Fight Odds probably stole their model. And I used to work for Don's Best, and Don's Best was literally something like this, but they had real lifetime odds that the second a book changed. And it sounds a lot like your other affiliate, Odds Jammer. And that's just because this is very important, because it shows you exactly kind of where these odds come from and how these books copy it as a market. And this is important to understand, and I'll explain a couple of these reasons. One thing I did talk to a couple people in the industry who were trying to understand who REF is. While I'm aware that BetOnline uses them, they are most likely a B2B company, which represents business to business, because I've worked for B2Bs as well. And they are, and they're also probably from Europe. Europe is well ahead of the Americans when it comes to sports gambling. I mean, Europe's been doing what, until a couple years ago, when the sports boom took off and all these other states outside of Nevada allowed legal gambling, we're just catching up to Europe. You could always bet at a soccer game. You can go in a stadium. So we're always following Europe, and that's where these odds are coming from. So they do have a team of people. And from what I'm to understand, and I've had multiple conversations with people that I work with that work in the industry, and they reached out to other people, is that these people will put out their odds. And a lot of them, I'm going to tell you right now, the key book to always pay attention to is Pinnacle. Pinnacle is the staple of sports betting, and there's a reason for that. They don't ban people. They let you bet as much as you will. If you're a winning player, they use that information. And now I'm not saying Pinnacle is the one that puts these out, but this could be Five Dimes, or it could be Chris. It could be one of those. I'm not 100% sure. But how this works is that these guys populate their odds. And then they have a select few people known as the sharps. We talk about sharp betting all the time. And when they put these odds out, the sharps are usually the ones that, or you can even say sharks, because they are just lurking, waiting for them to put out these odds. They have their opinions of their fights. And once these get released, they hammer away. And then once they hammer away, these books will then adjust. So when you, what is this? UFC fight now? Oh, okay, this is the next one. Go ahead and you can click on the history, go ahead and hit on that Felice Herrig minus 150. When you hit that, you can see, go ahead and just click on it, and it will show you the history of the odds. Oh, no, go back and just click on the minus 150, where your mouse was. Yeah, right there. You can tell right there, and when you go to the far left, plus 100. See, they opened it up at even money. This was an even pick, and when you put your cursor over that, it will show you when the date is that they released it. It was on the 26th, and then as you kind of scroll to the right, you'll see, okay, the sharps, they released it. The sharps pounded it. They opened it, and now they're just kind of adjusting. Now, the interesting thing to realize here is that no other books have lines on this, correct? So this is what the other books are waiting for. And if you look at all these other ones with REF, even if you look at some of these other ones that are completely filled out by the other ones, like DraftKings, BetMGM, Caesars, you will notice that the start date of those are always a couple days behind the other ones, because all they do is they work as a market. What's that, May 19th? Now go ahead and click on REF and see when they released it. May 16th. So they gave them 3 days to open it, and then they let them settle in, and then they open it as a market. The reason these books do that is because there are a lot of people out there that, well, not a lot of people, but there are a lot of people that are sharps. Like in my time in the industry, the only people I've seen that are technically professional gamblers are the people that pick off these lines and they do arbitrage bets. Because what they do
What's
is
an arbitrage bet?
now, an arbitrage bet is like if these books all opened up their own odds, let's just say they, and they all tried to come up with it, and someone had plus 110 on Volkov and then plus 110 on Rosenstruck. Well, guess what? You bet on one book at plus 110, then you bet on the other book at plus 110. No matter what happens, you're going to win money, correct? Because both of them are giving you a 10% return on your investment. You're going to lose 100, and that's what these guys look for. So that's why these books copy each other, because the goal of a sports book is to get money on both sides of the fight, and then they will adjust accordingly. And you're not going to get both sides when you have an ARB with another sports book. You're only going to get one side because everyone's going to be pounding away at that, especially the sharps, because they're not your typical $5 to win 1,000. They're the guys who are dropping big money on these fights, and they're the ones the sports books are afraid of. They do not want it. So these books they work as a market. And now, going into my next segment here is just kind of like, what do we have for our next segment here? I think this translates over really well.
Industry misconceptions you want to talk about.
There we go. See, we're kind of going right into that. And that is that these books, they all try to pretend like they have, every single one of these books try to pretend that they have like their own group of people that make their own odds. And it's just simply not true. If they did, we would be so freaking rich, because if all the books were like, okay, and we think this fight's going to be this, and then they put it out there, and then another one, that's when, sites like OddsJammer and Don's Best and Best Fight Odds really come into play, because then you're going to get all these arbitrage bets that we just spoke about. Because you really think these books have the same group of team members making these odds, and they just so happen to line up like the way they lined up on this thing? Not a chance in hell. And it drives me insane, because like I watched a podcast, I couldn't even finish it. It was during the pay-per-view one with the Oliveira fight, and it was DC, Aljamain Sterling, and the head of a sports book. I'm not even going to say who it is. And it was pissing me off, because they're asking him, they're like, well, Rose Namajunas and Carla Esparza fought before. Did you factor that in at all when you made these odds for this fight? And the guy's like, no, we did not. We knew that fight. And he just gave this whole story on how they came up with the odds. And it's like, dude, pound sand, bro. You just copied the market, because that's how these sports books work. Quit leading people into like you did this and did all that.
So do they not even have on staff like an MMA expert that sets some of these?
No, not even close. They don't.
So then what about like Bet Online, right? We like to push Bet Online because they have those buy around bets, the plus 3.5 bets. They're the only ones that still offer that. Mm-hmm. Do they come up with that on their own because there's not a reference for that?
Well, you see, and then they could. But the other thing too is Bet Online uses a B2B company. That's what I worked for before. I worked for a company that ended up getting bought by one, and we supplied odds to probably like 8 or 7 different sports books. So gotcha. That sports books did it. And so someone somewhere is making these odds, right? They're not just coming out of thin air. And these companies are using them to put out these odds. So they're one of the few that do it. And, as these sports books get bigger and the industry gets bigger, it's like you need to differentiate yourself from the other ones, and the way to do that is offer more stuff. So, which is phenomenal for us, because then other books try to copy it. And then, once these odds start moving, that's when you can start taking advantage of it. But when it comes to books having their own, like MMA expert, not even close. And that's something that you need to realize too. And that's why these things like OddsJammer and Best Fight Odds are so key, because some of these books straight up just hand copy everything. And it's just like they tell someone, they're like, if they take a big bet, the first thing they do is they look at all the other books to see if they needed to move it. And then they're like, oh shit, that moved. We need to change it. And I'm not even kidding you. That's how it works. And MMA is a small fish. And this kind of goes back to it, because they're not checking these odds nonstop, because, it's not football. It's not their big money maker. It's just kind of like an appetizer to the big main course. So yeah, they don't really have it they don't pay attention to it. They sleep on it. These books, now some books do have algorithms in place that kind of trace the market, and they will adjust as the market moves. Because some of these, those are the better books. And this is out there. This is public information. So I'm not trashing books and stuff like that. I'm just explaining how it works and how it really is. Because then other books, they straight up just have someone sitting in an office and it's just like 10 a.m. go through MMA. Okay. And then they go through MMA and they move it. And it's funny because you can catch, trust me, I caught me and my friends, when you do handwritten odds, you will find some massive mistakes. And I will never forget when I found flipped odds with, it was Cyril Gahn and Derek Lewis. And they had gone as a plus 220 favorite, and that should have been Lewis's line. That's because it's very easy to do when you're doing nonstop handwritten odds. I used to have to do it for player props with my last company. Every single player, we had to handwrite every single odd. And it's like when you're doing hundreds of these all day, every day, it's like you're going to fuck up. And you know what? And then we give them a little messenger, we drop a big ass bet, or my friends drop a big ass bet, let them know, hey, you should check out what the other books have on this fight. So these are the important things to kind of realize with the industry. They try to convince you that they have a whole team that gets together and sits at a round table and breaks down the odds and the variance and all this stuff. And it's just simply not the case.
It's just copy paste. So there's essentially one or two authorities, and then everybody just sort of copies those odds, goes from there and monitors the market from there.
Because they have to, because if you're a little off, if you're off,
then you'll get abused.
You'll get abused. And because there are people, and that's literally what they do. They have screens upon screens with numbers upon numbers, and some of them have teams of people, and that's what they search for. And with technology being what it is, like they have scrapes, they scrape it all, they get notifications. So that's exactly how it works. And MMA is phenomenal because it's one of the most subjective kind of odds you can put out there, because we're dealing with a fist fight. Like you've said multiple times, there's a fist fight, and it's not like any other sports. And that's kind of why I personally like MMA, is because these guys don't know much about the backgrounds of these fighters. These guys don't know. So they can get it wrong because there's so many little fights. And it's just look at the undercard of a UFC, fight night. It's like, do you think they're really breaking it down and all this stuff? It's like, no. They're not. So that's where it comes into an advantage for people like us,
I mean, that's first of all, thank you so much for hopping on and doing this, because so far this is awesome, and obviously some of our viewers already knew this, and a lot don't, and it's really nice to know these things, and it gives some confidence as well in two things. One, some confidence that hey, there is money to be made here, even if you're just having fun, and two, I'm a victim of this as well. I will do, every week we break down these full fight cards, and I'll do my notes. I'll do who I think is the winner. Then I look at the odds, and sometimes I'll see them and I'll be like, am I an idiot? What did I miss that the person who I think is going to win this fight is a 2-1 underdog? Like when Belal Muhammad versus Vicente Luque. I'm like, what am I missing here? And I stuck with it, and it worked out. And we just saw Jake Hadley a few weeks ago. He was a big favorite, and he lost. And you watch that fight, you're like, yeah, that dude should have lost. And you let the odds, convince you of things that you know better than. And it's nice to hear that, no, they don't care about this. They're throwing up the odds. They have one person that really does some research, puts in their odds, and then everybody copies after that. So at the end of the day, when you're picking your sports book, you should probably pick the book that has the most prop options, because that gives you a little more variance, and that has the easiest deposits and easiest withdrawals. Because after that, the odds are all the same.
Basically, and going back to what you said, is there is nothing more that I love to hear when I watch your podcast than when you guys align, like, what the fuck is this? How is this guy the underdog? It's like, these should be flipped. And when I hear that, it's like, I'm going to trust the guy who's been managing fighters for 15 years and week in, week out, dedicates all his time to MMA. When he says something like that to me, and that's why I listen to your podcast. And then, you know what? I will do it with my work in Monkey Knife Fight, because I am the sole provider of all the stuff that we have for Monkey Knife Fight. And I know we don't do the odds, but we do fantasy points. And, when you guys are on a big underdog, I know when I had Jacob's Lock of the Week, Michelle Gatto as an underdog, I remember I completely flipped her fantasy points and made her the favorite, and vice versa. And I'm like, all right, well, let's do this. And then and some people saw that and they're like, oh, well, that's stupid. And we made a lot of money as a company. And that's how I utilize you guys, because people are like, I can't believe that the underdog is the favorite as the fantasy points. And then everyone, and that's kind of what I do in my job to make money. And so, and plus I love it, man. I just have a passion for this stuff. And you guys' insight is absolutely right. But when you sit here and stare at numbers nonstop, it gets engraved into your brain that like, this number means this number means this guy must be the favorite. Now, I do think there is something to be said on people that like open up and then they steam really bad and they keep steaming because the public money's going that way. And that's something I look for myself because there might be something there, while you may not agree with it, but it's like obviously some sharp people move that line. A lot of people agree with it. Yeah. And then it starts going. And if it keeps trending that way, that's where you got to like, okay, maybe kind of look into it. But for the most part, yeah, always trust yourself. I'm telling you, just in life, guys, everything. It's like, don't be influenced by all these outside people. It's like, you got to trust yourself and trust your gut instinct and everything, man. And like, especially when it comes to this stuff.
The other, the next piece you want to talk about, and you said you're staring at numbers all day, is just sort of the odds and the probabilities, what some of these odds actually mean. Because we're always talking about minus 200, that's a good favorite. Plus whatever, that's you double your money, stuff like that. So you want to talk about some odds, probabilities, and what that actually means when you break it down?
Yes, this is going to be probably one of the most, this is going to help, I think, a lot of us right here. Is I really want to influence how you guys change your way of thinking. Angela, do you have like an odds converter you can pull up for me real quick?
I sure do. Here we go.
You do. Okay, you guys. First of all, let's go ahead and type in, we use American odds. Decimal odds is more of a European thing as well as fractional, but the bottom line is these things all mean the same thing. So the best example I want to give you is go in that American odds and type in minus 150. This is usually the staple of what you tell me all the time is what you think. Like, oh, if it's minus 150 or greater, I try not to go beyond 150. You say this all the time. And Angelo, there's times I'm just like, fuck, Angelo, come on, bro.
I'm too conservative for my own good.
Yeah, but I really want to show you what the difference is. Now, look at the implied odds. It says 60%, right? So what this is telling us is in order for you to be a profitable bettor at minus 150 odds, you need to win 60% will break you even. And the way to look at this is that we know that the minus 150 means if you bet $150, you will in return get 100, correct? So that's what they will return you. If you give them 150 at a minus 150 favorite and you win, they're going to hand you $250. That's what these odds mean. So think about it like this. You bet 10 of those minus 150s and you win 6 and you lose 4. Well, let's see here. You win 6 at minus 150 and you're making 100 each. Obviously, you just made $600, correct? But you lost 4 of them. And 4 times minus 150. What does that equal? 150, 300, 450, 600. You have broken even. So you need to win more than 60% to make money. Now let's go to the big minus 200. And this is where
massive favorite.
The massive favorite. Oh my gosh, you need to win 6% more of the time to be a profitable bettor at minus 200. And this is what I find comical because people are like, it's 6%. And I understand where people think this way. They're like, that's such a big favorite. And because it's 200, it looks like you need to win 25% more because 200 is 25% more than 150, correct? So people think, oh, you got to win so much more to be profitable at 200, but it's not true, you guys. It's 6% more. And what gets really absurd is when you get to these bigger numbers because the odds will jump. Like, go ahead and type in like minus 300. Now 75%. Now type in minus like 380, which is like such a huge jump. 4%. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like I really encourage you guys to start looking at it by what your implied odds are to be profitable with these bets and not so much by the numbers themselves because the other reality is too. So it's like, okay, I mean, minus 200 and minus 380 seems massive, right? It almost seems double. And you would think you need to win twice as much. And I'm not saying these are always good odds to be taken. And I get that the money line makes a difference, but it's just like minus 3 or just go to minus 400 real quick. Just go to minus 400. And yeah, you can do all them is 80. So you're going 66% for minus 200 and then you double that and to 400 and you're going to 80%. I mean, that is not twice the amount that you need to win to be profitable. I mean, we're talking about 14% and the numbers just seem that big where you're just like, oh, I don't want to touch this. And it's like, well, do you? Because like the thing about UFC that I love so much is that it's not sports. The one thing that all these sports have that in common is that they all are going to have the exact same time. Like a football game is going to have all the minutes. A basketball game is going to have the exact same minutes per game. No game's going to be like, all right, Warriors are kicking the Mavs ass. Let's just end it here. We're done in the third. They're going to finish the game out. They're going to have possessions, and that's where they break down the possessions, and that's why these lines are so tight, because it's all broken down mathematically by possessions and this. But MMA is not that way, and MMA doesn't account for things like for example, I'll never forget when you told your Parker Porter story about how he had a kid, got a short notice fight and all this stuff. And then like months later, Tom Aspinall fought Spivak on the exact same situation. And Spivak was flying across the world, weeks notice, just had a kid months before, and books put out -220. And it's just like, how can you possibly factor that in there? And people were like, oh, 220 is such a big thing. It's like, well, hate to tell you this, I think Tom Aspinall wins that fight way more than 68% of the time. In my mind, it's 100% of the time. And these are the ways that I encourage you guys to start kind of considering these odds, is like, and I've heard you say it a few times, and you're like, oh, I think if these guys fight like 100 times, he wins X amount of times. Well, this is a good outlier. It's like, if they fight X amount of times, do you think he's going to win more than 80% at a -400? So really, that's just kind of the point I wanted to reiterate to you guys, so we can, just get that through our head, that we need to start kind of focusing more on the number that's in the implied odds as opposed to the number that is the actual odds. Because the numbers are so big that it just kind of, our brains are tuned to think that way because of basic math, but that's not necessarily what these numbers mean. And
I think that's hugely important, because and I am victim to this. I'm too conservative for my own good when it comes to this stuff. And this is a perfect example, because if I saw a fighter at -400, I'd be like, there's no way I'm going to do that. But all this is saying is that fighter wins 80% of the time. And it's like, probably. Probably. So yeah, -400 is worth it. If you told me 80%, like, we'll see what Amanda Nunes's odds are in this rematch, but she probably wins that fight 9 out of 10 times. So more. Yeah. So instead of looking at it as, well, she's a minus, let's see what a -1000 is. So 9 out of 10 times is essentially a -1000 favorite. And you look at that and you go, what, -1000? That's absurd. It's a fist fight. Anything can happen. But it's like, but do you agree Amanda Nunes wins this fight 9 out of 10 times? Because if you do, those odds are not so crazy anymore.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, sure, that's not where the value is, and the real value comes when you think someone wins 9 out of 10 times and they're a -130 or -140 or something like that. Sure. I mean, that's what we're looking for. But inevitably, it's just like, if you are 100% convinced, I mean, someone wins. Let's go back. Who was your 99 out of 100? It was Joel Alvarez.
Oh, it was
Joel Alvarez.
Joe Alvarez was on the wrong side of my.
No. Yeah. You're on the other side.
Armin Sarukian. I said beat Joel Alvarez 99 out of 100 times, and he was only a 2-1 favorite.
Now, that's a better example. I'm not trying to put this out here to be like, guys, go out there and find all these massive favorites and think. I just kind of want to change your opinion on how you view it. But like, when you say something like that and you're that convinced someone's going to win and he's -200, even if it's a -300, it's like, you know what? I'm all for that. I will get that action. I mean, obviously it's a fist fight. Like you said, anything can happen, but that's why I love betting the women with you. When you find these women that you just don't think have pillow hands, and that takes out the knockout variance, and you just know one hustles and grapples and this, and it's just like, we can just play that to our advantage, and I just love it. And that's why I love UFC, and I love, I'm just such a big fanboy of this stuff. It's awesome.
No, this has been it actually has been pretty enlightening, especially for me, who's a little too conservative. I see -200s, I'm like, I'm done. I pretty much back off from there. But the reality is, if I see a -200 favorite and I think that person, what was it, 66, and I think that person wins 8 out of 10 times, 7 out of 10 times, something like that, it's like, well, that supports these odds, and that -200 favorite is probably worth a bet.
Yeah, exactly. Do not let these odds take you away to your conviction of the fight. That's the point I really want to make. Is just like, if you are super convinced someone is just going to dominate a fight, whatever, win a fight, it's just like another one that, oh my gosh, I love some of these. Like, I saw one, and I forgot who it was. It might have been it was a while ago, and it might have been oh gosh, who was the girl who just opened up? I can't even think of her name. The first fight, Sam Hughes. Sam Hughes was fighting someone a while ago.
Oh, I loved Sam Hughes in that fight.
Another decision maker, and she was minus 120 to get to the third round. And I was like, wait a minute. So if she gets to the third round of a fight 56% of the time or 54% of the time, I'm going to profit. It's like she gets to the third round 90% of the time, if not more. And it's like, those are the little things. Like, I love it for the time props. I just absolutely love it for the time props. So yeah, I mean, don't let these numbers take you away from your convictions. That's the point we are trying to make here today. So,
No, I love it. It's definitely changed my mind on how I think about some of these things. I hope people watching get something out of that. The last thing we wanted to talk about, we get this a lot. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll talk about my 2-fighter parlays, right? I was on a streak there where I was grabbing 2 favorites that I was positive was going to win. I smashed them together. I got some decent odds and I went from there. And then inevitably we get comments saying parlays are sucker bets.
Yeah.
And then conversely, we talk about some of these sports books allow you, let's say you do a 10-fight parlay. They allow you to cash out if things are going well. So I just wanted to get your take on, are parlays sucker bets, and is cashing out ever worth it?
Okay, so to get to it, I don't think a lot of people really understand how a parlay works. So I just kind of wanted to run through what a parlay actually is. What a parlay does is, like, it basically takes, if you win your bet, you have 200, it takes all of that money that you already won that should be in your account, and it forces it onto the next bet. So when you're doing these minus 200s to get like even money, it's basically saying if you do 200 to win 100, okay, well, cool, then you should have 300, but you don't have 300 because you're putting all 300 on the next fight. You're just doubling it up at those odds. So, and then if you do it with another fight, it just keeps doubling it up. And that's inevitably what a parlay is. Help me if this is making sense or not.
You're basically saying if I have 5 fighters I want to bet on, if I parlayed them, it's basically like doing 5 individual money line bets, except my money is locked in to all 5 of those fights. Where if instead I just did a money line bet, then a money line bet, a money line bet, a money line bet, money line bet, I now get my money back after each bet, and I have the freedom to decide to do what I want to do with that money. Is that essentially the difference?
That is exactly it. And why I think it's kind of a sucker bet in a sense with MMA, because unlike other sports, you don't have 5 fights going off at the same time. They all take place at different times. So if you're not going to be able to watch the fights, or you're busy, you're moving or something like that, and you're just not going to be around, it's like, okay, yeah, go ahead and do a parlay. But inevitably, yeah, it's the same thing. Like if you had $100, you bet it, whatever you win, and then you win that bet, you go to the next fight, you bet all of it again, and you just keep betting all the money. That's inevitably what a parlay is. So, I mean, they're still fine to do. I don't mind it, by all means. It's like, especially like a 1 or 2 leg one, because it's not much different. But the reality is like they're holding on to, why would you let the books hold on to your money? That's kind of why it's a sucker bet, because especially, I just feel like with MMA, you don't necessarily need to do it for the reasons I just told you, because you have it in your account. These books pay you the second the fight's over. The money will be in your account balance. It's like you don't necessarily need to keep risking all of it, especially when we talk about units. That throws units out the window, because like if you hit 3 of them, then it's just like you all of a sudden throwing a 5-unit bet on something. And that's not the key to success long term. And I also like it too, because some people get all pissy and they're like, oh, this book sucks, they don't let you parlay this. And it's like, sure they do. Just bet it individually, and then like if it's a shitty odd one, like -4 or something, or whatever, and it's like $100 returns you 20, well, go put $100 to win 20. Then you have 120 for the next fight, and bet that whole 120 on the next fight. And that's exactly what a parlay is. It's really just doubling down, doubling down, doubling down, doubling down. And inevitably, you're probably going to lose one of those fights, and that's where you go bankrupt. And that's why and then that goes back to these cash out options. These books are just showing you all these cash outs. They're like, we'll let you cash out. We'll let you cash out. Well, they're taking money from you. If you bet it individually, and it's just like, if you look at the odds that they're giving you for that cash out, you would have never been in that situation if you didn't parlay it in the first place. And, you could very easily bet all of it if you wanted to. But if you didn't want it to, like, gosh, it's so hard to explain these things because a million things go through my head. But trust me, the odds they're giving you when you cash out, they are taking a good percentage of it, what you should have had if you bet them individually. So the cash outs aren't necessarily a great thing. I mean, I get it because like you can get scared because it's like, oh, I can still win all this money, and if I lose it all. It's like, yeah, well then you shouldn't be parlaying in the first place.
Well, and it goes back to what we said in the beginning of this, where 90% of bets placed are like $5 to win $1,000 bets, whether they're long shot odds or these crazy parlays. We have our free Discord server. We're constantly getting people posting their screenshots of their $5, 10 fight parlays that hit. And it sounds amazing. And you're basically saying, great, you threw $5 on it, you won all that money. But that's the same exact amount of money you would have won if you started with 5 and then just kept doubling down all the profits from that initial $5 bet on every fight the rest of the card. It's the exact same amount of money. And if you wanted to stop halfway through, you would have more money in your pocket than if you took the cash out option halfway through.
That's exactly it. If you took a $5 bet and your first fight's plus 300, so you're going to win $15. Right now you have $20, and then you're taking that whole $20 and like on another plus 200, that's going to make, that's just going to put you up to $60. And it's just like, holy crap, look at all this money. But it's like, you would have done that, or you could have hit the cash out button and they'll offer you 50. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. And It's just like, and you're like, okay, and that's exactly what it is. And they're taking $10 from you and because you pushed out. And yeah, no, that's exactly what it is, Angelo. So it's just kind of, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it's not hard to explain. That's exactly how it is.
Yeah, listen, this is enlightening because I've fallen victim to this as well. I still love my 2-fight parlays, but I love get you. I get your point where mathematically speaking, it's the same if you don't parlay them, and parlaying just gives the sports book one more chance to take your money. So.
Especially in a sport where the fights don't take place at the same time. If you're going to be sitting behind your computer, BetOnline is phenomenal. A lot of these sports books are phenomenal. I mean, they will have that money in your account by the time the decision is read because they want you to have that money. They want you to have that because the sooner you have that money, the sooner you can put it back into their books. So that's something these books really thrive on. So I think, yeah, exactly. If you can put that, just bet it again, So there you go. And inevitably, when you get to that last leg of it, if you're parlaying it, it's like sometimes it's forcing you to bet like 5-6 units because you've been crushing your other ones. And while it's great and stuff, it's like you still have that option to do it.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that because you're right. If it wasn't a parlay, if I do a 10-fight parlay and we're 5 fights in and we've won every single one of them, in real life, I would not take all of that money and put it on the next fight. I would not do that in real life. But in a parlay, that's exactly what you're doing. And when you look at it that way and you look at the odds the way that you broke them down, you really suck the fun out of all of this. So I appreciate you absolutely sucking the fun out of betting and parlay. No. So thank you so much. The Grinch of sports betting.
No. Reilly. Not at all, man. I mean, I'm helping you guys keep your money because like I know you've all cashed out at one point in time and now it's just like, I'm just kind of trying to explain. And trust me, it is fun. If you're betting $5-10, win a bunch of money. I mean, what's $5-10 lost? But it's like in the long term, this is a grind, man. This is a marathon. This isn't a sprint. We're trying to kind of grind out profits week in, week out. And it's just kind of important to understand how this works so you have a better chance. I'm just trying to help you all become better gamblers. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to take out the fun of gambling. So, I mean, still, by all means, if you can't watch the fight 10-fight parlay, go for it. But if you're sitting there watching it all, you shouldn't be doing that.
Well, and I think it's a great point to make before we go here that essentially, like you said, MMA is different than other sports. If it's a football Sunday and there's 3 teams, you can't do individual bets because there's 3 teams are playing at the same time. But then you may want to parlay those. But like you said, fights, if you're sitting down and you have your phone or have your computer, you really don't need to do a parlay. You can just bet it right there while you're sitting down watching. But if you're doing stuff, running around, not really catching the fights, you want to do a 2-fight parlay, go for it. Just know that you're doubling the bet halfway through. And that it makes a lot of sense to look at it that way. And I definitely appreciate the sort of the practical mathematical approach to all of this to put it all in perspective, every week when we do this. So thank you very much.
Of course. I mean, I can see people in this industry not being happy with me doing this podcast and being pretty upset that I'm explaining, like breaking it down and opening your eyes to shit. I promise you, people are not going to be happy if they find this out. So I'm really sticking my neck out there
Yeah.
telling you guys this, but this is common information that's out there, you know, and this is,
Well,
like
and
I
that's
said, I love this community. So, and also it's like, if people have an issue with me talking about odds like this, then I honestly, I'm not working for assholes anymore. And it's like, I will jump into another industry if this gets me banned from the industry, but I don't think it will. There's a
well,
lot of
you didn't reveal any. You're not a magician talking about how they sawed a lady in half. This is,
yeah.
people know this. Not everybody, but people do know this. It's information that's out there. So I just appreciate you taking your years of knowledge and experience and the grind that you do every day, and then explaining it in normal terms for people to understand. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else does.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this answered a million questions that we get every week.
And I'm sure we're going to have a ton more. And you know what? I'm in that Discord. Just hit it up if you have some, or even post on some of these links and I'll try to check them out. Angela does a good job of hitting me up when you guys post in these videos with a question, letting me know that you posted. I might have had some things a little off, but I'm trying my best to kind of explain to it, and not everything's an exact science. I'm just trying to help everyone out. We're all on this together. I love the We Want Picks families, and we're just trying to grow. That's all we're trying to do.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm sure everybody watching appreciates. You have questions, like Chris said, he's in the Discord. Make a comment down below. I will probably slice and dice this video as well, because there's a lot of good individual content here.
Yeah, we filmed a lot.
Yeah, well, I'm going to slice and dice it as well, because there's a lot of solid information here. So, again, genuinely appreciate this. And frankly, I'm expecting a lot of questions, and we'll probably film a part 2.
Hey, works for me, man. I'm always around and I'm always willing to help you guys out. Like I said, you guys are my boys, man. I love this channel. I love this group. I love it all, man. So hit me up whenever.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thank you. And I'm sure I'll be chatting with y'all later.